Tracy and I? Oh. Okay.
This up.
Oh, there we
So
go.
we'll start with the minutes. Do we have anybody who's read the minute and has an issue with them?
I move that we approve the minutes from the February 27th meeting as submitted.
Is there a second? Been moved and seconded. We accept the minutes from February 27th. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. So. I
Mr.
don't actually
Chairman,
have a printed version of the opening statement, so I'm gonna try to do it by memory. Hopefully I don't leave out too much. So this is the time and place for the hearing involving land use file 102/23. A public hearing on proposed code amendments regarding standards for manufactured housing. There are rules of procedure for taking testimony. Those rules are in the back on one of those tables back there. They're supposed to be. So do we have anybody who has got any ex parte contact or bias by any members of the board here?
No, not on me.
No. So let's go on to the staff report. We have a staff report?
if you can hear me, we do. Are you able to hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, super. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Sorry, I'm not there in person. The issue before you tonight with this public hearing are some proposed code amendments to the standards for manufactured housing that will bring our land use and development code into compliance with recent changes in state law. House Bill 4064 was enacted during the last year's regular session of the legislature, and among other provisions, required that no local government may have in their land use code standards that for manufactured homes that do not apply to site-built housing. Our current code includes a number of provisions to the standards for manufactured housing that do not apply to site-built housing. Those include a minimum width of 24 feet, standards for the materials and pitch of the roof, standards for the type of siding that may apply, a requirement for a manufactured home to be continuously enclosed around its perimeter with concrete block, brick, stone, or a combination thereof, as well as a requirement that it be not more than 12 inches of that enclosing material exposed between the ground and the bottom of the home. And finally, a requirement that transportation mechanisms like wheels, axles, and a hitch have to be removed. Secondly, there's a provision in state law that now prohibits the city from requiring a mobile home park from having a minimum lot size of more than 1 acre. And our code requires a mobile home park to be a minimum of 5 acres. So the amendments that you have before you will bring our code into compliance with state law by combining these standards for site-built homes and manufactured homes and having them all have the same standards. So with that, I will open it up to, and also changes the minimum lot size for mobile home parks from 5 acres to 1 acre, and also make some minor changes to the submission requirements that recognize that everything now is done electronically and not require multiple copies of plans to be submitted. So with that description, I will take any questions the commission may have, and then we can open it up to public testimony.
So are there any questions from the commission?
So Dan, these are the changes that we discussed last month. These are all the same as I read them. We haven't changed anything since last month, have we?
Correct. The only caveat to that is to make sure that the changes I made after the discussion last month accurately reflected your discussions.
Any other questions? Are there any proponents' testimony? Are there any opponent testimony? Any governmental agencies? General testimony? Any of you just want to talk about this? No. Questions from the public? There you go, 2 chances in a row. So we're back to questions from the commission. No more questions from the commission. So is there a staff summary?
I don't have anything further to add. You've got the recommendation to forward these to the city council in my staff report, and options and suggested motions at the end of my staff report, as well as in the packet, a draft order that will be your recommendation of approval to the city council.
Okay. So we'll close the hearing and go to deliberation. Anybody have any comments, concerns, issues they want to deal with right now? No,
We're good.
bunch of happy people here. Okay. So. The chair would recognize a motion.
So Chair, I move to adopt the draft order prepared by staff and forward the proposed amendments to the city council with a recommendation for adoption.
Director. And there's a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Again, we don't have a written closing statement here tonight either, but basically what it says is that this is going to be passed on to the city council, and they'll do this very same thing in the near future.
And that, excuse me if I may, that near future is likely to be April, I think it's the 17th, the 3rd Monday of April.
Okay. So once again, this is the time and place set for the public hearing in matter land use file matter 2-02/23. An application for comprehensive plan amendment and official zone map amendment from Dark Horse Enterprises LLC at 190 Pine Street. Again, there should be information back there on the counter or the table or someplace about the rule.
There's nothing.
Okay. So I'm sorry that there's nothing back there. So let's go on with the staff introduction.
Okay, and before I give the introduction here, let me, for the benefit of those who are in the audience, say some of what's first of all, apologize for the lack of an opening statement. That skipped my mind as I've been doing this remotely. Secondly, to make some of that statement for the benefit of the public. This is a quasi judicial hearing. That means the Planning Commission is acting in a manner in which they will be reviewing the application and the testimony that is offered to determine whether the application meets the criteria for approval in the code. In order to be effective, all testimony must address the criteria in the code for approval of these applications. In order for an appeal of the Planning Commission's decision to be made, objections and concerns must be made with enough specificity regarding the criteria for approval for the Planning Commission and the applicant to respond to that testimony. So with that, my introduction is, as was stated in the opening statement, these are two concurrent applications that have been submitted for the property at 190 East Pine Street. That property is the corner of East Pine and North 2nd Avenue. It is, the applications are to amend the comprehensive plan designation from residential to commercial and to change the zoning for the property from medium density residential to commercial general. And with that, I will turn it over to the applicant and their representatives. And then I will be back following their presentation with the staff report.
Okay, so this is the time for the applicant to come forward and present themselves. The applicant here.
Let's see. Sorry, my name is Tracy Brown.
Oh.
And I'm the applicant representative. Is that Jeff there? Go ahead and sit down, Jeff, if you want to. Thank you. So again, my name is Tracy Brown, and I'll be the applicant's representative as a land use planning consultant, formerly the planning director with the city of Sandy before being a private consultant. And I believe in the room we have Jeff Brubeck, and he'll provide a little testimony after I kind of do my opening comments. And then we also have tonight available to answer any questions. And if there's specifically questions about the traffic work that we did in looking at compliance with Goal 12, we have Mike Ard, who's a traffic consultant. So thank you very much. So again, this is a request by Dark Horse Enterprises, who owns the existing veterinary hospital, to change the comprehensive plan map and zoning map for that property at 190 East Pine Street. The property is about 0.29 acres, and it's located right there at the corner. The rest of that block is also owned by the applicant with a veterinary clinic, their parking, and there's a couple of old houses on that property with frontage along First Street that the property owner is also, or the applicant is also purchased. So it's currently zoned medium density residential, as you know, and as a comprehensive plan designation of residential. So the primary purpose of this request is to kind of align the zoning with the applicant's plan for the property. And they have plans to expand the veterinary hospital. I guess with that, since they own the property along First, that property will be available for additional parking and loading and unloading areas, because we know those were some concerns with the neighborhood. So with this project, that will allow, with this application, that will allow them to kind of clean up some of the concerns with parking and to expand the building and provide a better business in that location. So what we did with this application, we went through and looked at all the requirements for the criteria. On page 2 of my narrative, I looked at the public utilities, and it's currently served by public utilities. We did look at the transportation aspects of the project, and that's where Mike Ard did what is called a transportation planning review analysis letter. And that analysis letter was reviewed by the city's traffic consultant, Kittleson and Associates, and was found to be an acceptable letter and analysis. In that analysis, he's proposing a cap on the number of daily trips. So there's some assumptions in that, and we're proposing to cap the number of trips at 200 trips, and that should be sufficient for the use that the owners would like to do on the property. So I looked at the criteria in the code for both the comprehensive plan amendment and the zone change, and they're really very similar. So I won't kind of go through them both in detail, but I would like to just kind of highlight some of the items that we did look at. The first thing we looked at is to make sure that the project is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, as well as the statewide planning goals. And so in my narrative, I did that by looking at the transportation, the public facilities and services, the housing chapter and goals. And I guess I'll just address that a little bit. The request is to change 0.29 acres of land from residential to commercial. So effectively there will be a very small reduction of residential zone land. And looking at the city's buildable lands inventory, there still is a surplus of over 450 acres in your urban growth boundary. And so this change, it represents less than 1% of the city's overall residential land. So we did also look at the economy, and that chapter and goal is looking at trying to enhance or provide more opportunities for business in the community, and that's what this project would do by allowing the zone change, would allow them to expand. And I guess I would note that for the benefit of maybe the neighbors, the intent is not to increase the number of employees. That's talking to the applicant. It's to modernize, provide better facilities for the staff that is there, and to increase and enhance the parking and loading aspects of the project. So effectively, you'll have essentially the same number of employees. It will be just a nicer, newer, and better building and a better functioning site as well. So I did also look at the statewide planning goals, and a lot of those are the same as the city's comprehensive plan. We also looked at to make sure transportation facilities, like I mentioned, were adequate, and that's where the traffic analysis letter or the transportation planning rule analysis letter comes into play. So those are the other part of the goal is that the use will not significantly affect existing or planned uses on adjacent properties. And this is where we'd like to just note that the project, the construction of a facility to join the existing facility. It just makes sense to use this property to expand that because they're butting each other, and to use those other properties, which are on the other side of the alley and on North First, for parking. And so we feel that we would not be adversely affecting, because this will essentially be improving parking and loading facilities for the overall block. And then I guess the last thing is that it's not going to be a adverse change. And so with that, I think we've shown through our findings in our narrative that the project will be an overall benefit. So with that, I just, in summary, again, we're requesting to change the comprehensive plan map and zoning map designations for that 0.29 acres at the corner of Pine and Second Street from commercial, or from residential, to commercial. And with that, it would allow the veterinary clinic to be expanded and the site to be kind of improved. So that's the conclusion of my presentation. And I now turn it over to Jeff, just as a vet in the project, to kind of say a few words about his intent for the project.
So you're up.
Okay. Thanks for your time this evening. My name is Jeff Brubaker, and I'm one of the owners of Stayton Veterinary Hospital, along with Mike Reynolds. And veterinary services are in high demand in this community and in the surrounding communities. And the building that we built, the veterinary hospital that we built 6 years ago, it's on the property just to the south of 190 Pine, the property in question. But that building we built 6 years ago and is now being used at capacity, or maybe just a bit beyond capacity. And so in order for us to continue to meet the growing veterinary services needs in this community and the surrounding communities, we need to expand the physical size of the veterinary hospital, as well as increase the parking. So that's why we're asking for the plan map amendment and the zone change. That's pretty much it, plainly.
Okay. There'll be questions from us as time goes on, so you don't need to stay there if you don't want.
That's a nice chair, but
So let's go to the staff.
All right, thank you. And before I get into my staff report, I remembered one aspect of our opening statement procedures that got skipped, but is very important to do. And that is to make sure that none of the planning commission members have a conflict of interest or bias regarding these applications, or have had any ex parte contact. So this would be the time to declare if any of those situations have applied.
all right, so I'll declare ex parte. I knew who lived at 190 East Pine. I also attended spin classes in the garage in the morning, the dark hours in the morning. And I've observed the parking issues around the area. So do I believe I can be unbiased? Yes, but just that you know that I'm aware of the property and what goes on there.
My ex parte would be that I did drive by the location today, as I do pretty much every day. I live fairly close to this property, not within the boundaries that would have received the notice of hearing, but I do live within that basic neighborhood. So I drive by the area daily, and I can also speak of the parking and traffic issues. But I also would say that I can be unbiased in the deliberations.
All right.
Okay, with that, thank you. So I hope that you have in front of you both a supplemental staff report and a revised draft order. After the staff report and draft order were written and the Planning Commission's packet was printed and distributed, correspondence from some neighboring residents and property owners was received. And so the draft order has been revised to reflect that written testimony. And as I state always in my staff reports, the draft order may need to be further revised depending on what oral testimony you receive this evening. I want to touch on two of the criteria for approval in my oral remarks this evening, and that is the issue of adequate utilities and traffic impacts. Let's make it three. And the issue of compatibility and impacts on the neighborhood. So first, utilities. You will note in your packet is a memorandum from the city engineer that notes that there is adequate sewer capacity in the area around the subject property for any potential sewer flows that are likely to be happening from that property. However, the sewage from this neighborhood eventually flows to Ida Street, where we have some capacity problems that the city is working on. In the words of the city engineer, the timing of any new development that adds sanitary sewer flows will need to be dependent on the city resolving those downstream capacity issues. I believe, and I recommend that the Planning Commission make a finding that there are adequate utilities, but want to make sure that the applicants know that because this is only an application for the comprehensive plan and zone map amendment and not an application to actually do development, that at the time that that application is submitted, there may be issues with the downstream sanitary sewer capacity for those sections of West Ida Street and North Evergreen Ave, et cetera, as is mentioned in the city engineer's email that you have in front of you. Secondly is traffic issues. You have in front of you as part of the application an analysis that is required under the state's transportation planning rule that was done by Mr. Ard, who's joining us remotely this evening. Mr. Ard pointed out that the worst case scenario from potential commercial development is enough that it could cause traffic concerns, and therefore recommended that a condition be placed on the approval that would limit any future development of this property to no more than 200 daily trips. And so that was reviewed by the city's transportation planning consultant. They concurred with Mr. Ard's methodology and his conclusions, and concurred that such a condition would be within the realm of what's permitted under the state's transportation planning rule. The draft order and the revised draft order that you have in front of you include that limitation as part of your recommendation to the city council. Thirdly is the issue of compatibility with the neighborhood. And that is, I think, really what the letter that we received on Friday addresses. And you will see in the revised draft order on page, where are we? Page 5. And again, on page 7, highlighted in yellow, the additional language that I've added into the findings from the original draft order that recognizes that testimony. And you need to decide tonight whether that letter and whatever oral testimony you receive presents enough information for you to determine whether the proposed zone change will or will not significantly have a significant adverse effect on the existing or planned uses on adjacent property. That's the criteria for the comprehensive plan amendment, and the criteria for the zoning amendment is that the potential uses allowed by the proposed zone will not have an adverse impact on the surrounding land uses. Now, let me again stress that this is not an application for development. This is an application to change the zoning designation, and the issues of off-street parking and off-street service area for large vehicles and trailers will be addressed at such time as the applicant returns with a site development permit. And the other thing in response to the written testimony that you received is that while the city has the ability and the Planning Commission has the ability to control the physical development of property, we do not have the ability to control the behavior of people. So while we can require that a new development provide a certain number of off-street parking spaces, we don't have the ability to require that they actually be used and that people don't otherwise legally park on the street. We're only controlling how the property is developed, not what happens afterwards and how people behave and what they do, any more than the Planning Commission has the ability to control how fast someone drives up the street. We don't have the ability to control where they park. So with that, I will open it up to any questions the Planning Commission may have. Again, you've got the suggested revised draft order in front of you that acknowledges the written testimony we've received. And depending on who follows with oral testimony, we may need to make further revisions to this order.
All right. So are there any questions from the commission?
So Dan, I guess the point to make, especially for the public out here, is that as far as parking on the street, that is not a planning commission decision. That if there were to come to any type of residential parking only signs or anything like that, comes from Public Works and the city manager's code, and the police department does not.
That is correct, Larry. There are provisions in other titles of the city code.
Right.
Not in Title 17 land use, but in other titles that do allow for the city to establish a residential parking zone only. But that's not a function of the Planning Commission or the land use development process.
Right.
Other questions?
I have a few questions,
Go ahead.
if I may. Thank you. Is the property in question, the building that's located on it, is it currently vacant, or is it currently being used?
It's
Stayton right now.
Okay. And so you would be removing that building and expanding in,
Most likely, yeah.
okay,
The plan would be to expand the existing hospital north.
Assuming that's Jeff answering the questions, Jeff, can you come to the mic, please?
So to answer the question, would we be removing the building on 190 Pine? Probably we would be, but I guess that would, I'm not a architect or a builder, so I'm not sure how it would all play out, but my guess is because we would be wanting to expand the existing veterinary hospital north, my guess is that it would that the expansion would become too close to that building.
okay, sure. Yeah, I was just kind of wondering generally. So the usage of that property would be basically the same kind of usage that you're using the existing property where you have
Yes.
your current
Yes.
location. Okay. Just a couple more quick questions about the buildings on First Street. Maybe the properties. Did you say that you already own those?
Yes, that's true.
Okay, and so those may or may not become more parking? Is that what you said?
That's what in our minds, that's what would
Okay.
happen, but
Okay. And do you have any idea about how over time, how you would comply with the 200 daily trip capacity?
That may
guess-
actually be more a question for me as the transportation engineer.
Sure.
So this is Mike Ard with Ard Engineering, and I prepared the transportation analysis for the site. There's oftentimes a misunderstanding regarding what it means to apply a trip cap on a property. So I think it's good to provide some clarity at this point. When we propose a trip cap for a property, what we don't envision is people sitting out there with clipboards counting the number of cars coming in and out of the site on a daily basis. That's a waste of people's time, and it's really not something that's typically going to be fruitful. Rather, what we anticipate when we propose a trip cap is that whenever a development is proposed on the site, that we would assess the number of trips that are projected to occur resulting from that land use. So in this case, it would be an expansion of the veterinary clinic. And by virtue of the trip cap, it would limit the size of that expansion, the square footage of the building that as it expands onto the property to the north. And we would look up using national data for veterinary clinics that has been developed from dozens to hundreds of sites to see how many trips are associated with each 1,000 square feet, to project out how much of an expansion could occur without generating more than 200 daily trips, and then say, we're going to cap the building expansion to no greater than that area. So that gives you some surety that the expansion is not going to have significant impacts on the surrounding development without needing to have someone monitoring on a daily basis what's going on. And I hope that explains well what that process is and what the trip cap means.
Yes, thank you. I think that's all.
And again, to follow up on that, as I said earlier, at such time as they are ready to expand the clinic, they'll be back before you to go through site plan review. There will be a traffic study done at that time, and part of that will be saying that Mike or one of his competitor colleagues will do the study and say this size veterinary clinic is expected to produce X number of trips per day. And hopefully that number will be that number will have to be 200 or less in order for them to be approved.
Yeah, I will add one other thing that we looked at what we thought was the maximum reasonable expansion that could fit onto the property. And calculated that to be about 8,000 square feet. That's probably larger than what they intend to do in reality. And we showed that that generated 172 daily trips. So given this land use type of veterinary clinic, we don't anticipate any problem fitting within that trip cap. It really would be if some other use came in, that trip cap would come into play and become more meaningful.
And I presume that those trips would generally be directed away from the neighborhood.
Yes, they generally speaking are going to come from the larger streets. So First Avenue would be a major source of trips, and maybe to some extent Hollister as well, but not really so much along Pine Street or on Second Avenue, other than trying to arrive at the site.
Okay. So are there other questions from the commission?
Dixie, I can't hear you. Can you get a little closer to your mic and make sure it's on?
There, now it's on.
Yeah, good.
Did you hear me?
I do now.
That new property, are you planning on making most of that parking or a lot of that parking for the big trucks and the trailers and stuff?
The 190 Pine.
Hmm?
The 190 Pine
Yes,
property.
yes, uh-huh.
I don't think we were, and our intention is to not make most of the 190 Pine into parking. Our plan would be to expand the veterinary hospital, the structure to the north onto 190 Pine. And then our hope would be that we could then use the two properties on First Avenue to convert that into parking.
So it would take up the busyness on the streets now.
That would be the hope, yes.
That was your plan.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And are the properties on First Street already zoned according to what you need?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So is there any proponents testimony? Opponents testimony? Alfred Michael Oz, I live at 1452 North Second Avenue. Is that on? Your green light?
Okay.
Is this better?
Yes, thank you, Mike.
Now I can hear it. My name is Alfred Michael Oz, 1452 North Second. I live about half a block away from the proposed zone change property. And I would urge you to deny the zone change. We, the surrounding neighbors are all zoned residential. About 6 years ago, the current vet was moved from First Avenue back onto the block where a house had been located. And at that time, it was zoned commercial. It was certainly within the rights to develop it. About 2.5, maybe 3 years ago, all of our properties, which had been zoned general commercial or commercial general, were rezoned as residential medium density. Part of the reason for that was to prevent additional commercial activity going into this particular property, as well as the rest of ours. We are primarily a residential neighborhood. The view from my front porch is kind of catty corner, and it's a house. It's residential. If this is zoned commercial general, they will be able to put an expanded vet or 7-Eleven or whatever they want onto that property, which will invade our neighborhood. And so primarily, we would prefer to keep it as a residential because it offers a kind of a buffer between us and the current vet clinic. We understand that that he would like to do this, but it is our position that we would prefer that it not be done. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have just a quick
Okay.
question. What's your cross street, Second and?
He's 1452, right?
He lives on the second.
Lives on Second.
I live on Second between Pine and Fir.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
And all the homes around me are all residential.
Thank you.
Any other opponents? Any governmental agencies? General testimony. Go ahead. State your name and address.
My name's Callie Gillette and I'm a resident of the Stayton community.
I'm
And
sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we need your address because we are legally required to send you a notice of the decision since you're testifying at the hearing.
Perfect. Well, I live at 2108 Cardinal Avenue Southeast here in Stayton. And I
Thank
just
you.
wanted to yes, of course. Thank you. I wanted to take a minute just to speak about the veterinary hospital. And in the last 3 years alone, Stayton Veterinary Hospital has demonstrated what it looks like to serve the community, and they serve the community well. They remained open during the entire time of the pandemic when other clinics closed. We had to modify, or they had to modify things, but in order to remain open, but we did everything possible for the community. Time and time again, we've heard stories from people who are grateful that they found us because their normal vet was not able to get them in and their pets were in critical condition. We've served people from outside the area of Stayton and have expanded what our community boundaries look like. People coming to us from outside the area like Salem or Portland. People coming will often spend time in the Stayton area while their pets are in the clinic, being serviced in the clinic. And they will provide benefits to the local economy, visiting stores, restaurants, and other shops. Another example is during the fires, we remained open in order to help our clients and their animals who were affected and hurt directly from the fire. We were also a place where people could donate to those that were affected. We serviced our lobby or created a space in our lobby where people could provide goods and just various different products for patients, for pets, when people needed it most. And that's something that Stayton Veterinary Hospital provided and something that was a big benefit to the community. By expanding the community, we have introduced the town, by expanding the community we serve to introduce the town of Stayton visitors and the outside area. People continue to come back to us, and that means they return to Stayton and contribute to the local economy. It would benefit so many people and their pets if Stayton Hospital were able to proceed forward with this expansion. To allow growth in a physical footprint, not just for our clients and their beloved animals, but also for the community of Stayton as a whole. I just wanted to kind of mention how great the community is benefited by the clinic and how great expansion would continue to increase that benefit. So that's all I had to touch base on. Thank you, guys.
Wendy, did you get her name and address?
I did.
Okay, thanks.
Same routine, name and address.
I'm James Baxter. I live on 1435 North Second. It's north of Pine, right next to the veterinary. I just wanted to mention that there's a couple issues that the vet has been facing, like one including the parking. And then obviously they're at max capacity. And there's probably a couple hundred units that are being built right now by Dairy Queen. And so it's going to bring in a lot more animals that they're going to have to help provide care for. So by expanding, it will help out all the people that are coming into Stayton. So it'll benefit the community. And then there's obviously the parking situation that the surrounding neighborhood has an issue with. And that's part of his plan is to, from what he says, is to bring additional parking in so that'll take up a lot less of the street parking, because some people, when they have visitors or whatnot and the staff members are parked in there because they don't have enough parking spots or whatever the case may be. The plan of, from what I understand, is to expand to eliminate that that conflict of interest. So that's all I had to say. But
All right,
Thank you.
so
thank you. Stewart. Anybody else wants to have a question? So we're back to questions from the commission. So I wonder, in the process of building the new expanded veterinary clinics, if there wouldn't be a way to throw up some kind of a buffer along Second or Arborvitae. I know you've been down the Arborvitae road a couple of times. But I'm sure that might help to appease may not be the right word, but just to think, because you have to come back and do another process. I just want to plant that seed.
So Ralph, I guess as a former, much larger transportation system developer, where I've had hugely controversial developments, one of the processes that needs to happen here that hasn't happened yet is to get a preliminary site plan developed so that you can partner with your local neighbors and show how you're going to improve quality of life for those neighbors and make it better and partner with them in that process, which will make usually leads to acceptance and better feelings about all this stuff going in. So right now, I don't see anything here which wouldn't tell me what your circulation pattern is, how you're going to bring traffic into your parking lot, how it's going to egress out of your parking lot, how you're going to manage all that, and how that's going to hopefully remove parking in front of residences on Second and Pine and so forth as they do now.
And those really aren't things that we
Nope,
addressed at this
nope.
hearing.
No, that's future stuff.
In the future, that'll happen. At least we hope that'll happen. So the applicant, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, I guess I would just add, we understand the sentiment of the Mr. Ost that spoke on behalf of some of his neighbors and, the owners clinic. I talked to them about this and, they take this being a good neighbor seriously. So, the reality is this is the first step to allow them to then expand and improve the parking. So that's, I think, an important part of this, that, with that building expansion, there would be a need and there, a desire by the applicant to improve the parking for himself as business, as well as the neighborhood. So it's it is a win-win in that sense. So I guess the other thing that there was mention about the zoning that was changed previously, and I wasn't involved in the city at that point a few years ago, but it was my understanding that the zoning was changed to be more aligned with what the uses of the property was. And, it can be a problem for property owners that have a residence and the property is zoned, say, commercial. So if that residence were to burn down, they might have difficulty rebuilding that residence. So that's could have been part of the impetus for some of the rezonings that occurred. In this case, as was mentioned, the property or that particular residence at 190 would be removed and it would be redeveloped consistent with the requested zoning. So we feel like we, meet the criteria for, being a good neighbor and all of the other statewide and planning requirements, criteria in your code. We appreciate your time, and if you have any other questions for us, we'd be glad to answer those. I don't know if Mike R, do you want to just, if there was anything else you wanted to mention about the transportation or not, or you feel comfortable with what you've done so far, but go ahead, floor is yours.
I think for the most part, the planning commission has the information that they need, but it might be good to just talk about the alternatives. What does a yes mean versus what does a no mean? And this is a strange site when it comes to answering that question. The reason being that the rest of this block is all zoned commercial. Just the 190 site is zoned residential. So a denial of this application, where the veterinary clinic still owns the entire block, essentially forces them to do something that they don't want to do, which would be to place the expanded veterinary clinic onto the west side of the block. The problem with doing that is that you get a discontinuity where the building is no longer connected and the parking becomes more constrained because we don't have the ability to put commercial parking onto a residential lot at the northeast corner of the property. So there are a bunch of things that kind of come together to make it make sense for the 190 site to be the one that develops. The strange thing that I wasn't allowed to say in the transportation planning rule analysis is that the northwest corner of the block is the one that has the high development potential, because you could put in a 7-Eleven or a fast food restaurant without a drive-through on that site, and you can generate a tremendous amount of traffic and a tremendous amount of parking demand associated with that site. And rather than do all that, the intent here is to convert that to parking, something that's not generating traffic and something that's not adding to the on-street parking demand. So the way that we'll be using those existing commercially zoned properties is actually going to be significantly less intense than what it would otherwise be if this zone change is not approved. And I think the overall picture for the community gets much better with the zone change than what it is without it, both in terms of the development potential for this particular user and in terms of the overall impacts to the community. And for that reason, I do think that it is a step in the right direction. And I look forward to being able to present a development plan that is well thought out and addresses those specific concerns that the neighbors have raised.
All right, thank you.
All right.
So anybody
I don't know
else?
if Jeff wanted to say anything else on his behalf, but I think that concludes our presentation at this point.
Hey, do you want to say anything?
I don't think I have anything to add.
All right. So we're on to the staff summary.
I don't think I have much more to add beyond what I've already said. As I said in my staff report, I think the task before you is to look at the both written and now oral record that you've got to determine whether those whether the testimony you heard tonight or that we received on Friday is specific enough in addressing the approval criteria and what your recommendation should be. Following up on something that Mike said about your decision of a yes or a no, your task tonight is not to approve or deny these applications. Your role in this process is to make a recommendation to the city council. If your recommendation to the city council is denial, the application still proceeds to the city council, and they will consider your recommendation and make their own decision. So you are not a gatekeeper here. This application will proceed to the city council, who has the authority to make those decisions. With that, again, you've got a revised draft order in front of you. And your motions, whatever they are, if they are to adopt the draft order, the revised draft order should specify that it is the revised draft order that you're sending forward, or should be modified appropriately. And I guess the only modification to it that I can see is just to note that there was testimony from Mr. Oz and the others during the public hearing.
All right. So with that, we'll close the hearing. We go on to commission deliberation. So what do y'all think?
So. Yeah, if you're on First Avenue, that's places that's open to commercial development, those lots, those two lots that they purchased on Pine and on commercial there, those are commercial and can be developed now. It's a contiguous block. I think it makes sense to control some of the development that might go on there, and this is an opportunity with the development and establishment of additional parking to potentially benefit, down the road, residents in that area. I don't think us making a decision to stymie economic development within the city is probably, it would be a good use of the property.
I don't think that's our place.
No,
anyway.
I know. I get carried away.
And just looking at the map, if they actually do put parking in there, it'll just about triple what they already have. Do you have anything, any issues or concerns?
No, I was just gonna say that, that there are existing concerns, from the neighborhood, so hopefully doing something like this would help actually fix some of those concerns, because I don't think that there is it doesn't sound like there's another way to fix those right now, or at least another proposal. My only other comment, I know the question part was already closed, but I would just be interested to know if there's a timeline for drafting the site plan or for the expansion in general.
I think once we conclude and the city concludes, there's like a whole year before they have to actually do something. Right now, the city is planning to put a 30-inch, I think it's 30-inch sewer pipe in Ida. And they can't do it right now because of groundwater. So I'm sure that'll all figure into the mix as we go along here. Right. You guys have anything? Well, I think if you don't do something, then we should stay with the and it's better if you have a parking on a lot than they alleviate like
most of these issues will be addressed when the property becomes ready for development.
Right.
And from my perspective, the effort the requirements for the annexation, or not the annexation, but the
Zone amendment.
zone change and the plan map change. So I don't really see any basis for me to oppose.
Okay. So. I was pleased to find that they already own that other property there, and where, was it Ed Hansen used to own that?
Yes.
Which was like an instant answer to part of Brother Oz's or Mr. Oz's issues with parking, but not the whole way. So, does anybody have anything else? So we have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move the Stayton Planning Commission recommend approval of the application for Dark Forest Enterprise LLC, land use plan number 2-02/23, and adopt the revised draft order behind Park plan.
Is there a second? So it's been moved and seconded. Those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So. One of the reasons we need your address, your name and address, so we can send you the results of this. And these folks will be doing that, within the next week or so. This will then be moved to the, city council, and they'll do this all again. And I appreciate it. I feel less lonely having you all here. Thank you all for coming. So is there any other business today?
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So is there anything else you want to know?
I have nothing else for you this evening, Mr. Chairman.
So can you give me an idea of what's happening on Walk Club Road? I know they keep moving stuff in and out of there, but I never see any people working.
I'm not quite sure. First of all, I didn't hear you very well. If you can look, if you talk into your mic, it'll be much better. And so I didn't hear where you had in mind.
So on Golf Club Road, the apartments there, do we know if they've gotten their permits and that sort of thing?
They have not yet received their final site development permit from the Public Works Department. I believe that the engineering is this close, assuming you can see my fingers, to being finalized. And we're still going back and forth with the development agreement. And the latest is we might actually be back before you next month for a change in the conditions of approval from the partitioning. When you approve the partitioning of that parcel into two, we worded a condition of approval that if what is now the apartment parcel develops before the corner parcel, that they would need to make frontage improvements along the entire frontage of Golf Club Road. Because of the engineering of the roundabout at the intersection, what Public Works is saying is it no longer makes sense to have them do that. And that it makes more sense to reword that condition of approval and either get a payment in lieu of the improvements, or we just make sure it gets done when the corner parcel is done. So this was all stuff that came in discussion just last week. And I'm not quite sure right now where it's going to go, but we may be back before you at the April meeting to get that with a proposal to revise that condition of approval so that the engineers can get it to work.
All right, thank you. So I say we adjourn. Any issues with adjourning? You guys want to stay for a while or?
Good.
Just
No,
chit chat? No?
It's 10 after 11 here. I've had enough.
Well, let's go home then. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
all for.
you. And again, Ralph, my apologies for the lack of an opening statement. Just got away from me while I've been on the road here.
It certainly complicates things.
It does.
Sing and dance.
Yeah.
Hey, Dan, I'm gonna end the meeting now. I'm gonna end the meeting.
Oh, you get to do that, Tracy.
I think so.
Go for it.
See ya.
But thanks